Hi, Megan.
Hi, Garance. How are you?
Good. How are you? What is this, take 4?
It wouldn't be blogging heads if we didn't have to start over and over and over again.
Indeed. Well, we may cut out once again because this is being done on a cell phone from here, deep in the bowels of the Washington Post, which is a very large cement structure. I wanted to start off by saying I'm very glad we're finally doing our Blogging Heads episode. This has been a long time coming.
Yes.
And
this has been almost a year, I should say.
Has it? Yeah, I think so. It's sometimes hard to schedule these things. I am curious to hear your thoughts on the State of the Union last night, which you were live blogging from the Megan Mance.
I was blogging it from stately McArdle Manor. It was vacuous, the way that State of the Union addresses are always vacuous. I mean, they're not intended to convey information, right? They're basically sort of a theater opportunity for the president to have all of his compatriots stand up and applaud. This one was particularly weak because it's not like there's even any vague possibility that he's going to do anything. There was the inevitable nod towards finding peace in the Holy Land, which I think is slightly less likely than President George Bush suddenly developing the ability to heal the blind. But overall, I was sort of regretful that I now live in D.C. and it is my job to watch these things. How about you? What did you think?
I thought it was the real action seemed to be down on the floor and not in the words that he was putting forward. Everyone seemed to be much more interested in the Democratic story right now than in in what the president had to say. It's going to be hard. And
it's funny too because I feel like sort of 4 weeks ago everyone was like, oh, the Democratic race isn't that interesting. GOP brokered convention, and now it's all changed.
I know, it's sort of, this whole race has been like a Law and Order episode, in that every time you think you know how it's going to turn out, there's like this new twist, and then there's, guest appearances by Fred Thompson.
Yes, I think next, like, Jimmy Carter is going to come back, run as a Republican, and win with 80% of the vote. That'll be the final wrap-up.
Right.
To surprise everyone with, as Sam Waterston stares deeply and meaningfully into the camera. I actually think the most interesting part of the speech was that he's trying to send 2 completely separate signals on Iraq. On the one hand, he's trying to signal Iraqis that we've got this steely resolve and we're not going to leave. And on the other hand, he's trying to signal to the American people, like, oh no, this isn't going to cause any more sacrifice. And those 2 messages are completely mutually exclusive. So I thought that was probably the most interesting part of the speech. And then, the most boring parts of the speech were just where, oh my God, stem cells, not again. So tell me about the Democratic race, because you are the expert on this topic. Hillary and Obama. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's just really fascinating right now where things are going. I mean, the snub on the floor last night was sort of interesting. I mean, Obama says after the fact that he, in fact, was just trying not to lord it over, or rather, David Axelrod, his campaign strategist, said that he was trying not to lord over Senator Clinton, the fact that he'd received the endorsement from Kennedy. And I think the fact that the Kennedy endorsement has received so much attention, and the fact that, people are very interested now on whether Al Gore will endorse and what kind of power that would have, really gives you a sense of how powerful President Clinton's endorsement would have been had it not so naturally gone to his wife, and gives you a sense of why people were so outraged by some of the intense attacks he has been making on Senator Obama over the last few weeks. I mean, imagine if Ted Kennedy, instead of giving this, very gracious speech in which he praised Obama's opponents as well, I mean, after the fact, and spoke very favorably of Senator Obama. Imagine if he had been out there and went out there on the stump every day as an attack dog against Senator Clinton. I think people would look askance at that, and I think, we're sort of getting a sense of what it really means to have a former president with this sort of natural conflict of interest running on behalf of his wife.
I think this is a really interesting point, and, a lot of people have compared it to the way that George H.W. Bush endorsed his son, which was he endorsed him, but he stayed out of the race. He didn't attempt to go in there as a kingmaker. I mean, and to be fair, part of that is that George H.W. Bush was not the world's most popular president, and so he didn't have the kind of the kind of power to help his son out that Bill does. But nonetheless, there's generally been this tradition of former presidents staying aloof and staying out of politics. And I think it's really hard because on the one hand, as a family member, given George H.W. Bush's example, you might have expected him to stay out. But as a spouse, that's kind of weird. You wouldn't really expect a spouse to just be like, "Oh, I don't really care who wins."
Right.
And
And
I think it all.
And Democratic primary voters, especially, they adore Bill Clinton. His words carry a tremendous amount of weight, and to the extent that he does things that sometimes seem outrageous, they still wind up being very powerful. If a former president, the only Democrat to win 2 terms in the latter half of the 20th century, comes out and speaks against someone, people grant that a significance and a weight and take that really seriously in ways they wouldn't, espouse normally.
I think that he is spending a shocking amount of reputational capital on his wife.
Yeah.
I think he is definitely. I totally see it in the people who are slowly, because they're Obama supporters, but also because they feel he's being unfair. I mean, they feel that the Clintons are not campaigning cleanly, and he's not just going out there and saying, I love my wife, and I clearly she's the best candidate. They're really attacking Obama, and I think that is running down the Bill Clinton goodwill pretty rapidly, surprisingly rapidly, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not totally surprised by it. I mean, I think it's fairly clear that Bill Clinton has always had an ambivalent relationship with the more liberal wing of his party, and that wing of his party is much stronger now than it used to be. And there's a sort of a much louder progressive media echo chamber than there used to be. But there were always concerns about him. I mean, he was the DLC, president. And I think those historic tensions have once again come to the fore, certainly.
Well, I think actually it points up something that I think, we're probably not uniquely well suited to talk about, but given how rarely female-female matchups come up on blogging heads, possibly at least better qualified than a lot of the blogging heads matchups to talk about, which is how hard it is to run as a woman. I mean, this is really unprecedented, right? You've never had a husband having to go out there and campaign, and how a husband campaigns with his wife, I think, is different from how a wife campaigns with her husband.
Yeah.
And even harder when he's a former president.
Yeah, and I think one of the things people always say about Clinton is, it would be great to have the first female president, except, we don't want it to happen like this. We, prefer someone like Kathleen Sebelius, for example, is a name that's often invoked as an alternative model, as someone who is the kind of woman that people would like to see, someone who did it on her own, although, of course, her father was also governor. And
I should say, after last night, that performance was shockingly bad.
And I think after last night, no one's going to say that about Kathleen Sebelius anymore.
Yes.
And that's sad. I mean, I think there's this idea that there's this full bench full of people who are somehow waiting, who have been sort of shunted aside by Senator Clinton, and I don't think that bench is very deep, and I don't think that bench is as strong as we might wish it were on either side of the aisle in terms of female candidates.
Yeah, no.
But one of the things I do want to say though about the relationship between Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton on this is, I think, Carrie Halley argued this in her op-ed piece in the New York Times about, America does have this history of electing political widows, as it were, political spouses, women who have been authorized by their association with a political man, be it a father or a husband. And that this has been part of the pattern in American life for women when they take on these positions for the first time. And we're seeing this again with Clinton being, the strongest female candidate today. And I think one of the things about that is that if you do have this sort of prior authorizing male figure there to grant a legitimacy to this female candidate that she might not otherwise have, that makes her able to take that step, I think that male figure, when he is falls under question, it really has a powerful impact on how the female figure is perceived as well. And so to the extent that, people were looking at Hillary Clinton, and sort of in the background there's the sense that, oh, well, we love Bill Clinton, therefore, we'll go for Hillary, to the extent now that people are saying, well, not so much with Bill. I think that's going to really damage her as well.
I think there's a weird disconnect, because on the one hand I feel like a lot of people like her because they feel like they're just re-electing Bill Clinton again. And yet they don't want Bill Clinton out there reminding them of that too strongly. Maybe I'm off base here, but I feel like a huge portion of her support is just like, well, things were good under Clinton, and why not bring him back?
One of the interesting things that happened, I think, with both the New Hampshire election and the South Carolina election is that the American, or at least the Democratic wing of the American electorate, sort of went through this process of deciding what is fair in campaigning and where are our boundaries and what do we think is legitimate. And, in this race you have a woman running for the first time in a serious way, where you have an African American running for the first time in this very serious way. Or either of them could be the nominee. Where are the lines? And I think New Hampshire was in some ways a referendum on the idea that, if Clinton loses, people want her to lose fairly and cleanly and not based on things that seem to have to do with her gender. And I think South Carolina was also a referendum on the same question, similar question for Barack Obama, that if he loses, people want him to lose, fairly and in a fair fight, and not because of things that might have to do with his race. And I think it's been interesting to sort of watch the electorates rejecting particular sorts of campaign strategies. And then, okay, so now we've gone through this, and, we've gotten this out of our system, and then the race goes forward from here. And that's the sort of question now is, having worked through these issues, and heading towards this giant national primary, how are people going to consider these two candidates?
Realistically, though, I think I sort of naively felt like this campaign, whether I liked Hillary Clinton or not, whether I liked Barack Obama, it didn't really have anything to do with the fact that one was black and one was a woman. It was just an independent judge of them as candidates, and I feel like that has been shredded. And I think it probably wasn't ever true, that I was living in a dream world. And do you think that they're actually going to manage, that whoever loses will lose fairly? I feel like no matter who loses, there will be some sense that either Barack Obama lost because people aren't ready to elect a black man president, or that Hillary Clinton lost because it is incredibly hard to be a woman in sort of any sort of high-level professional role, but maybe most in politics, where on the one hand everyone is looking for a strong leader and they want you to act like a leader, but there's pretty good scientific evidence that women are penalized for acting the same way that men do, that when women and men engage in exactly the same behavior, the women are thought of as being whiny or bitches, and the men are thought of as being strong, resolute leaders. The way they discover this is even when it's in writing. So it's not that there's a personality difference. If you just write a piece of text and you substitute the name Jane for the name John, suddenly the main is done at Harvard Business School cases. Suddenly the main character becomes much less attractive when it's a woman who's going in there and really kicking some ass.
No, it's true, and there's this real contrast between, I've read the same studies I think you have, that there's, women who are too nice are perceived as incompetent, and women who are too competent are perceived as not nice and lacking adequate personality skills to do their jobs. And so there is this catch-22 that women struggle with in their professional lives, certainly.
And I think that I don't want to paint it as sitting here as a woman saying it's so much harder for Hillary, because, in some ways it's easier. Barack is limited. There are some kinds of attacks that Barack can't make because he will be perceived as beating up on a woman, and voters don't like that. So, I think it's not sort of a black and white, it's impossible to run as a woman, but the challenge, I think either way, at this point in the race, whoever loses will have a not entirely unreasonable claim that their minority status had something to do with it. I don't know what your take is on that.
I think whoever loses, there will be several books written examining exactly those claims.
And I mean, ultimately, do you think that this division that has suddenly opened up in the Democratic Party is going to close up after the primary, or do you think that if Obama loses, black voters are going to stay home in November out of anger at what they perceive as unfair campaigning by Clintons?
Well, I guess the Clinton approach would argue that, they would probably, there's an expectation that people will come back around. I mean, that's always been, that was the idea with the whole idea of triangulation, is where are people going to go, right?
Right.
But I think this time does seem somewhat different, and I feel like there are a lot of tensions. I don't know. This is the real heat of the moment where it's hard to say what's going to happen. And it depends on who the the Republican nominee is, and it depends on how the contest goes and what other issues come up along the way. But there are some rifts that are going on now, and I think there's also a possibility that women may find themselves in this sort of quiet way that they've pursued a lot of stuff this cycle. Quietly turned off in a general election environment. And, white women are a bit of a swing group and in general election contests. And it'll be interesting to see how they respond.
Well, speaking of the who they're running against, the Republican race is getting almost no coverage.
Well, that's not quite true. It's getting a great deal of coverage. What it's getting is less. I think there's less interest in the Republican race on the part of the public, in the same way that Democratic turnout has been considerably higher than GOP turnout in all of the contests so far. I think there's just a more energized group of people on the Democratic side of the electorate than on the Republican side, and consequently, I think the sort of chattering wing of the press is probably chattering much more about the Democratic contest than it is about the GOP one. But today is the Florida primary, and and that's a complete toss-up right now. Nobody knows who's going to win it. Some of the polls say it might be Romney, some of the polls say it might be McCain. Florida's very popular Governor Charlie Crist endorsed John McCain. John McCain is back. Mitt Romney is still going along, despite not having had his original election plan work out. And so it's really fascinating. And then there's the whole, dramatic story of Rudy Giuliani's, collapse. It seems extremely unlikely that he's going to win Florida today. And so his whole strategy of, emphasizing Florida, and then in the end, he was pursuing a strategy that, as people said early on, has never previously worked, with the expectation that it might work for him, and it doesn't seem to be working.
What one of my friends called "put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket" strategy. And I think at this point, Giuliani's pretty much going to have to pull out of the race tomorrow.
Right. Well, he said that whoever wins Florida is going to win the GOP nomination, and it'll be interesting to see if that's in fact the case, because it seems like it's not likely to be him at this point.
It's interesting. I'm now thinking that McCain is the front runner, and that the race has gotten a lot less interesting. But Spencer Ackerman last week was on Bugging Heads with me, arguing that no, he thinks Romney could still pull it out. But I'm finding it hard to see at this point. So I guess in some sense it's fair that we're not paying that much attention to it. But we weren't paying that much attention to it when there were 5 people and no one knew who the front runner was. I think it's. Yeah.
But I think we're seeing that, the power of Iowa has been overrated. The race was so Iowa-centered for so long, and, Huckabee's surge in success in Iowa did not translate down the line. And similarly, Obama's success in Iowa did not translate tremendously into New Hampshire, although he certainly did better there than he would have otherwise. But I think we're just seeing that Iowa is a bit of a unique case in the system, and also just that it's an organizing state. And I think that's one of the things that has also people somewhat underestimated with the Democratic race, is the extent to which organization has mattered in these early states. And so that these giant meta-narratives about momentum are a little bit less important. South Carolina was always going to be Barack Obama's firewall. Starting last summer, their idea was that Edwards was going to win Iowa, Clinton was going to win New Hampshire, and they were going to win South Carolina, and then they'd go from there, with things being completely split, and they'd have a fighting chance going forward. And they did better than they expected, because they won Iowa outright. And,
It's interesting. I was hearing from people on the ground in Iowa, the Hillary organization there, I guess they didn't put that much into it, but it was just a mess. Like, they had no Hispanic language literature, despite the fact that there's a fair number of migrant farm workers there. There's no college operation. That they couldn't get their people out, and that actually they thought played more of a role than people were crediting in the fact.
Yeah, exactly. No, Obama had an excellent Iowa operation, and they were very well organized on the ground. I think it was clear a couple of months out that it seemed very likely that he was going to win Iowa if he just ignored the polling and focused on what was happening on the ground. They just had a really incredible team. I mean, he came from an organizing background, and they just devoted resources into, building their own machine. And in a caucus state, it really matters. And I think it's going to matter for him going forward into the February 5th caucus states as well. And then South Carolina, similarly, last summer they were, starting these, voter registration drives and organizing people, and it was just, a really big push in that state for a very, very long time. New Hampshire, by contrast, was always strong for Clinton. She had a very strong base in the state, and she had, some of her best organizers were based there in New Hampshire. She didn't even bring them to Iowa. Because I think they thought, Edwards was going to win Iowa, they could come in second, and then they'd go from there. And it wasn't going to be seen as a real loss if Edwards won. But then there was, then suddenly Edwards wasn't going to win, and then they had to start fighting for the state, quite late in the game, when they probably, in retrospect, should have been fighting for it sooner.
So going forward, what should I be watching for? I'll be live blogging, I think, from Reason Magazine's offices next Tuesday. What should I be watching for? Since you're much more of a political, much more politically savvy than I am. I mean, what are the exciting linchpins now on Super Tuesday?
Well, the question now is obviously California is going to be probably going to be the most influential state in terms of apportioning delegates, and it's also going to be interesting to see if Obama can do better with Hispanics. He did not do that well with Hispanics in Nevada, and if he can't do well with Hispanics in some of the other southwestern and western states, it's going to be harder for him to win the number of delegates on Super Tuesday that would allow him to go forward with a sense of real confidence that he could pull the thing off. It will probably go forward from Super Tuesday. I don't think it's going to be decided next Tuesday.
Where do you think it'll, assuming he does, I guess two questions. First of all, what's your explanation for why he doesn't do well among Hispanics? Do you have any sense of what are the linchpins there, or?
Well, I think, part of it is that, the Clintons have historic ties in Latino community. They have a lot of Hispanic surrogates. Patty Solis-Doyle, who's running Clinton's campaign, is, a child of Mexican immigrants. And, so she's, they've built a sort of deeper outreach apparatus in the Hispanic community. I think that there's possibly some class issues there. Obama, in general, doesn't do that well with lower income whites, and it's possible that there's some class issues with lower income Hispanics as well. But it'll be interesting. Nobody's really sort of figured it out, and seeing where it goes. And and he's making moves. He just picked up a Hispanic representative in Arizona today who'd been backing John Edwards. Just went over to his side, and so he's getting more people who can be his sort of spokesman on the ground. And of course,
I think Edwards stays in the race. And where do his people go?
Well, it's interesting. I think that there's, on both sides, there's interest, I think, in pushing the idea of Edwards as AG. I think the trial lawyers would like to see Edwards as the Attorney General. I think, there's some chatter about, nothing can be promised in a race. I don't think it's legal to do that. But, there's some chatter about that. He's not going to get many delegates going forward if he can't break the 15% minimum threshold. And going forward, it's going to be hard to see how he really gets more than 15% in some of these states. So it's possible that he can go forward without getting many delegates. And if he doesn't get many delegates, this is just going to be it for him.
Well, speaking of ethnic politicians, I think one of the things, and we mentioned this briefly, but one of the things on our list to talk about is the Kennedy endorsement. And what's actually interesting is the split in the Kennedy family and how deep it is, because it really has just fractured what used to be a pretty cohesive endorsement machine. And I agree with you, Ted Kennedy stayed classy, but it's kind of interesting for me because my dad, is Boston Irish, and in a way, this kind of signals, I think, the real end of that that era of like monolithic. You know, Hillary was Daniel Patrick Moynihan's protege, and should have been expected to pick up Kennedy. And you know, I think this is the end of the Irish machine politics, which, as you know, sort of a libertarian who doesn't like ethnic groups, doesn't like sort of particularism, is good news. But of course, as an Irish American, it's sort of we've assimilated. I think it's over. What's your take on the split in the Kennedy family?
It's like the split in the Democratic Party overall right now. I mean, I think the more significant thing is just that this is an endorsement that really carries weight for people. I think it's going to really help Obama at a moment where I think a lot of the sort of white liberals with historic affection for the Clintons were already looking askance at her campaign on account of her husband. The fact that Kennedy endorsed Obama, I think, is going to make them just move them over to his camp because Kennedy, I think, has such credibility amongst such individuals, and so.
And do you have any sense of why that happened? I mean, I know I don't have any intelligence. I should, right, with a last name like McArdle, but I've got no insight into how the break opened up. But I don't know the inner workings. It's an interesting question, actually. It's a very interesting question for somebody to look into. But I don't know the inner workings of that. I mean, I think some of the other Kennedys had been with Clinton already. I mean, the other interesting question now is what happens with Gore, and does he get in, and does he endorse? And I suspect that if he did, it would happen very soon. But I think people who know more than I think it might not happen. I think at this point he's sort of the last thing the party has to an elder statesman, and probably better if he doesn't. I mean, he's really done a pretty amazing job of rehabilitating himself. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be entirely surprising if he endorsed Clinton, but on the other hand, you know, I know they've definitely had their moments. So what do we have left to talk about? I know we wanted to keep this brief because you have important, busy Florida primary things to do with your glamorous job at the Washington Post.
It's so glamorous. I'm sorry. This is a good half hour. It's a good solid half hour, right?
No,
in the middle of the day.
Absolutely.
I think the only hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I think the only thing left to discuss was Hideous Prince for Spring, which is something you wanted to discuss.
Oh my God! Well, I sort of mentioned
which is,
offhand,
you know, as a topic related possibly to the Florida primary. You know.
Well, I think, you know, when you have two women together on blogging heads, I think you have to bring in something a little for the ladies. I think the hideous. Actually, it kind of goes back to something political, which is that Hillary Clinton has possibly, and this is a hard thing for women that men don't have to worry about nearly as much, so it's not really fair. But she has. I don't know why she doesn't have someone who's better at picking out things that look good on television. Because she's now been at several major events, like the New Hampshire primary. She was wearing a suit that I have no doubt looked fabulous in person, but on television looked as if she'd ripped up the carpet in her hotel room. And
you mean the sort of fuzzy gray thing?
Yeah, the fuzzy gray thing.
I think that was because they didn't think they were going to win. I mean, their polls had them way down also, and so they just didn't think it was going to be that important that she, you know, be wearing some, you know, bright, vibrant color or something like that.
But this is sort of a piece of the fact that all of a sudden, the new spring stuff is coming out, and I'm probably a little more sensitive to this because I only have about 4 outlets I can shop in because I'm 6'2" for viewers who don't know. So basically, and I'm normally proportioned otherwise, so I can't shop in plus size stores. And so I look at all of these emails I'm getting about, do you want to buy these clothes? And there's all these just absolutely repulsive prints. I got something from J. Crew yesterday where I bought.
You were blogging about those, yeah.
Prints. And it was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. It was like an olive green floral print with ruffles. And I thought the purpose of, and it was cut in a way that wasn't going to flatter anyone's figure. And I thought the purpose of this dress is basically to signal that the occupant, whoever's wearing it, is so good looking that it just doesn't matter at all what they put on their body. But J. Crew's demographic is now well over 30.
Yeah.
They're the people who came into the brand like me when they were in high school and have just sort of aged along with it.
Yeah.
So I'm a little mystified as to what's happening here. And this is definitely not the only outlet. It was just sort of the most egregious. What's your take? Or should we just wait for fall? Or
I think that there are always options, and I think that these are the kind of things that people wear to summer cocktail parties or something like that. They're not real clothing.
And we'll be far too busy covering the election to think about this anyway, right? Yet another black shift for the cocktail party for the circuit.
Yeah. Okay, Megan. Well, and I would be remiss if I did not wish you also a happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Your birthday here live on Blogging Heads TV.
That's right. Very special Blogging Heads.
Yeah, and we'll see what you have to say, or what people have to say in the comments about my pattern that I'm wearing today. So.
I'm wearing a very simple, very very brown, very boring top. So hopefully no one will have too much to say. Anyway, thanks for talking to me, and I will see you soon.
Until next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.